Simpsons the trading card game. Yet another drop in the torrent from when the trading card floodgates opened in the 90s and double aughts.
I saw weird stuff in that place last night. Weird, strange, sick, twisted, eerie, godless, evil stuff. And I want in.
But considering the amount of Simpsons stuff I have, I'm actually surprised that this slipped under my radar.
Oh boy! You mean I get 2 whole episodes on this one tape? Wow, talk about hours of fun! Well, actually the same hour over and over again. And actually each episode counts in around 22 minutes, so probably would have been better off just giving me a blank tape.
By the way, I didn't buy any of this stuff for myself. Before the days of DVDs, instant downloads, and season passes, if your relatives knew you were a fan of a show and that show was popular enough to garner a lot of merchandise, then that's what you got for Christmases, birthdays.
In fact, the Simpsons Jeopardy game was given to me by my English teacher when I graduated from high school. You know, looking back, I think it was her explaining the poetic imagery in Sylvia Plath's cut that really set me on a path of critical analysis. She always did have high hopes for me, and all I have to say now is sorry.
Nowadays I have things like the Archer season sets, but I still watch compilations on YouTube anyway.
I'm sorry, we got a little off topic there. I forgot, we were talking about The Simpsons, not Family Guy.
Buzzing.
There are several starter sets in this card game, and I got my hands on the Lisa one. Because, the more I think about it, the more she might be my favorite character.
But it's wrong for you to reward violent competitive behavior.
Okay, hun. Sucker! Competitive violent! That's why you're here!
I was actually really excited to see what they would come up with for a Simpsons card game, and I have to say, this is not what I was expecting.
You know, I don't know why I'm complaining. I couldn't tell you what I had in mind. Actually, it's a bit of a lie. I know exactly what I wanted, and that was a battle strategy game based off the Simpsons arcade cabinet by Konami.
A lost gem that, despite how merchandise crazy Fox was, never got ported to a home system, in spite of the fact that most people loved it then and now. Seeing all the Simpsons fight against the forces of Mr. Burns with all kinds of special moves, I just wanted to see a card where Marge attacks with a vacuum cleaner. Was that so much to ask? It's funny because at the time the game was completely out there in terms of the show's tone. However, over the years, the things that have happened in the game have become more and more plausible for the Simpsons universe.
Mom, make Dad tell the story right.
That's what really happened.
Oh.
But rather than focusing on combat, this game is designed around recreating the feeling of the show, which sounds obvious when you think about a card game based off a popular TV series. But still, it can't be ignored that this card game bears none of the conventions that are associated with a card game.
No HP, no special abilities. There are no numbers at all. And boy, did I forget how lame starter decks can be. Aside from Jenny and Frank, you have 3 copies of every basic character, and not in the cool way like they did with Maggie.
Luckily, I have a few booster packs here. So before we get into the actual game, let's see if we can turn this Season 15 deck into a Season 6 deck. Season 6 is the best, by the way.
Now that looks a little bit more interesting. I even got a foil Kangen Kodos and a rare Who Shot Mr. Burns card.
I have amazing collections of things people will never care about. How do stamp collectors do it?
The game is rather simple. You have 3 types of cards. First is scenes, which are locations in the Simpsons universe that you play characters on. And some have special abilities that change the flow of the game or offer rewards to certain actions. Like Springfield Elementary. If this scene is completed using Lisa, the player who played this scene gets 1 extra point. Or the Playground. When this scene is played, move all kid characters from other scenes to this one. Each player can only have 1 scene in play, but anyone can play characters on any scene. Now, what are character cards? Well, exactly what they sound like. Characters from The Simpsons.
Well, duh.
And underneath each one is a list of traits associated with those characters. You compare these traits with the one on the scene. Now, there are 2 reasons why you want to play a character on a scene. To complete it or to trash it. To complete a scene, all you have to do is have enough characters attached to it that share one of the listed traits. To trash it, you just play a character that doesn't have any of the matching traits listed on the scene. For example, let's take a look at 742 Evergreen Terrace, aka the Simpson House. Each turn, a player can play up to 2 character cards. They could choose to play one character on different scenes, or play two characters on the same scene. And then there are special cards called star characters. These are main popular characters, like Lisa. And as far as I could tell, you can only get them in the starter sets, as I didn't find any in the booster packs. These cards don't count to your character limit for that turn, so you can play up to 3 character cards. Now as you can see, this scene has 6 characters with matching traits, enough to complete the scene, which means that points are given out to all players involved. First, the player that set down the scene in the first place gets 1 point because it's their card. Each player that set a card on it used to complete the scene gets 1 point as well. The player that had the most characters on the card at the time gets an extra point. And the player that completed the scene on their turn can choose whether or not to activate the effect on the card. In this case, the player that completed the card gets an extra point. Trashing a scene is almost the same, except there's no bonus points for the most characters used on the card. Each player that played a character that was used to trash it gets 1 point, and the owner of the card gets 1 point. Really, the only time you ever want to trash a scene is to spite another player who had a chance of getting more points than you.
I just ripped the head off Mr. Honey Bunny. Bart, that was your cherished childhood toy. Ah, Mr. Honey Bunny!
Or the bonus on some scenes depends on whether or not you complete or trash it. And remember, it's up to the player who completed or trashed the scene to decide whether or not to activate the effect.
But it's a little funny when you think about how a lot of the humor in The Simpsons comes from characters not fitting in. I mean, think about it. Ned Flanders in Las Vegas, Milhouse landing the role of Fallout Boy. Even all the way back in the early seasons with Bart the Genius. So, by that logic, shouldn't wrecking a scene be worth more points than actually completing it?
Nerd!
The last card type is action. Basically, cards that can be used to activate special effects as long as the circumstances are right. Lisa's deck comes with a card called Exposed. You can play this card when a character is played on a scene that it doesn't match. You can then wipe all the non-matching characters from that scene.
Shall I show you to your room, or would you prefer to be dragged off kicking and screaming?
Ooh, kicking and screaming, please.
You can play all the action cards you want as long as the situation is right. However, if 2 players want to play an action card at the same time, the player whose turn it is goes first. And the player that gets 7 points first is the winner.
So as I was saying, even though this isn't exactly what I had in mind, I can't fault it for capturing the feeling of the series. The relationship between the character and scene cards feels like you're actually building a shot from the show, and the action cards fill in all the other dynamics you'd expect from a card game. I am genuinely impressed with this concept. Oh, I'm certain it started out as a cash grab, but you can tell they actually spent time on this.
Even just from a collector's standpoint, fans will enjoy the original artwork and jokes on the scene cards, and there's a good amount of self-referential and meta humor on the action cards, especially the ones featuring Krusty. And that's because this is genuine Simpsons material by Patrick Verone, who aside from The Simpsons has also written episodes for Pinky and the Brain, Futurama, and co-produced The Critic.
This movie...
No, not that one.
It stinks. It stinks. It stinks.
I can't believe it was the Simpsons card game that actually made me think about something that should have been obvious. Someone actually writes the flavor text.
But as a hardcore fan and card-carrying member of the Nitpickers Association, there are a few things that are bugging me.
First, the playing card motif. The patterns used almost remind me of the ones you'd find on the back of a bicycle deck. Again, obvious connection, but still jarring when you think about it. Plus, the yellow on black is really messing with my survival instincts. And then there's this scene, Krusty Burger. Now, this card works great in my deck because I have plenty of fat, stupid relatives. But what I don't like is the fact that you can't use the squeaky voice teen on it. I mean, come on, he's on the card! This next one's a little bit more of a legitimate concern. And that's that a lot of characters have very esoteric traits that aren't on a lot of scenes. For example, Hashslinger, Gossiping, Duo, Alien, Nameless, Scott, Slackjawed, and Yokel, and finally, Funkadelic. And if I play Mole Man on Springfield Retirement Castle, will that count as 3 old characters? Also, the rules are a little vague.
I'm looking at the card list right now, and I'm not sure if there are any other star cards. Oh wait, here's something. You can only have one type of star card in your deck. Well, does that mean I can have, like, multiple Lisas? I mean, it says you can have 3 copies of any other card.
All action cards matching star? Are they serious? Is that an actual rule? They never mentioned anything about the action cards matching the star. I thought you could just mix and match it. I was counting on mixing and matching it. That's actually kind of a big thing to spring on the player in the tail end of the suggestions section.
You know, I was wondering why they were giving Marge and Maggie the special treatment by giving them 3 different versions of their own card. And that's because it would have been way too hard to give them a star card with these rules. I mean, I don't understand why they did it. I mean, every other card game is built to grow from the starter deck, not be restricted by it. I mean, not only does this rule kill the point of a customizable card game, but it completely stunts the game's ability to grow in the future. I mean, think about it. A whole new star card means a whole new set of action cards. Or they just keep on building on the 5 characters that they've chosen already.
Wait a minute, did I just say 5? Oh my god, there are 5 star cards, but only 4 starter decks. They make you build a Krusty deck from the booster packs. But first you have to find the rare Krusty card. That is the worst!
And this was doing so good too. I mean, my god, who could have thought this was a good rule? Oh my god, a wizard did it.
I sentence you to a lifetime of horror on Monster Island. Don't worry, it's just a name.
He said it was just a name.
What he meant is that Monster Island is actually a peninsula.